Hello there, and welcome to my video about this Kango generator that I've decided to restore. I was going to tell you a little bit about it. It's something I bought from a farmer up the road, up in the mountains. Fairly young guy, and this generator used to belong to his dad. He was quite an accomplished mechanic, I believe, and unfortunately his dad died and the son didn't know what to do with it, so he put it up for sale. So I went and bought it off him. It's a 110 volt diesel generator. It's been put together by the company Kango, well known for their rock breakers and so forth, but the engine on it is a Petter engine, and Petter is it's a very old company, Victorian actually, and they used to make industrial engines, diesel, petrol, from really quite small engines up to sort of medium sized, anything industrial. You used to make them for pumps, you used to make them for generators, threshing machines, farm machinery, winches, stuff like that. This is the Petter AB1 engine. It was designed and manufacturing started in 1967. It's a fairly honest, simple little engine. I don't know when this particular one was made. I can tell you it was definitely before 1986. It's 4.5 horsepower at 3,000 revs, normally aspirated, it's air cooled, pretty simple really. There's no turbocharger or anything clever like that. They're fairly frugal. They're not manufactured anymore. I don't think they would measure up to modern standards on emissions and noise. And I've got to be honest, they are very noisy, rattly, smoky things. This particular generator set was designed for the navvies on the railways, for loading on and off trains. It's supposed to have two handles at the front. Somebody's cut them off, whoever owned it before me. The idea was, these were big guys back then, used to work on the railways. You'd have a guy at the back holding it here, guy at the front, and you'd load it up onto the railway wagon and take it off that way. And it was for powering big cutting machines like angle grinders, for cutting the rails, for railway maintenance. I didn't really have much use for it because it's only 110 volts. It doesn't do 240 volts. I think it's been pretty well looked after. It's a bit scabby, but it's in good running order. What I'd like to do is give it a bit of a restoration, to smarten it up a bit. It's not a particularly powerful generator. It's rated to 2 kilowatts maximum output. I know it will do more than that. It's a 4.5 horsepower engine, and a 2 kilowatt output on the alternator. I serviced it when I got it. Service, by that I mean changing the oil filter, which is down the side over here. Changed the air filter, which is on this assembly here, and an oil change of course, and also the diesel fuel filter, which is underneath there. My plan is basically not really a mechanical restoration because I don't think it needs it. I'm going to clean it up, brush off these sort of rusty panels in the frame, take the engine off the frame, wire brush it back to good steel, undercoat it, paint it in I'm going to go for JCB Yellow on this because it's kind of a yellow anyway. It's pretty similar colour, and just freshen it up so it looks good order. Maybe get some new stickers for it if I can find some for sale, and see how we get on. Okay, so looking at it from above, we have the diesel tank. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's a little bit of old diesel in there. I think it's cherry diesel, red diesel in there at the moment. We have on the top two important things for starting. We have this lever here. I can get a good view of it down here. That's a decompression lever, and the purpose of that is to reduce the compression on the cylinder to make it much easier to start. And that is important because it's a diesel. It requires a very highly compressed air in the cylinder, and it's almost impossible to do that by hand, give it the full compression. So you can turn the switch and it'll reduce the compression of the engine a little bit, and it just helps you get it started. It won't run well with the decompression on, because it won't be running at the compression that it needs to run smoothly, but it'll help you get it started, and then you flip it off so it's fully compressed again, and then it'll run better. There's also this little thing here where it says prime. I don't know if you can read that on the camera. Prime, and this is a priming hole, so you take that out. It's just a little plug in there as a hole, and in the hole you drop a few drops of engine oil into there, seal it back up again, and that will help it start, gives it a prime. The other thing you need to know is there is a run stop switch on the engine, and you can't see it very well down here, it's a little bit dark, but there is a switch, run stop. It's on stop now. Flip that to run, otherwise it will not start, obviously. That's about all I need to show you. On the side is the starter, where you put the starter handle. Let's see if I can film that. It's a bit of a faff. It's a geared one, yeah, it doesn't go straight on the crankshaft. There is an element of gearing to it. Okay, so you can spin it a little bit faster with that handle, which I'm going to do in a minute. It's very rattly when it goes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is attempt to start this engine up. It hasn't run for a while, but I don't envision there being any real problem running it. There's a little bit of diesel in there. That's the first things first. And put a little bit of oil, just engine oil is fine, in the prime hole, not too much. You tend to get a bit of a cloud of smoke when that first goes off, so I don't tend to put too much in because I'm indoors here, so I don't want it to be too smelly. Decompression open, like that. If that lever is working properly, you can feel a bit of spring on it, and that spring is it lifting the valve up a little bit so it can't compress down fully. It gives a bit of airspace. We've made sure that the engine switch is on run, which it is. So, holding the decompression open, turns without too much effort. It's not too hard. You can hear it going. What I tend to do is just give it a few revs around, just to get the fuel pump lifting the fuel up to the engine itself. Not get too stressed at this point, don't work too hard. That's probably enough. So I'll just stop so I can talk while I'm doing it. Next stage is give it a really good turn, get it spinning nice and quick, and then throw the decompression lever down, and it should go. Hopefully there'll be a bit of a cloud of smoke coming out the exhaust initially, which is going to be great fun. It's going to be really noisy, but when the priming oil's gone, it should burn a little bit cleaner. So here goes. Nope. Another go. Nope, she's not interested today. You can smell it though. You can smell there's definitely been a bit of diesel pulled through there. Okay, let's give it a bit more beans. Oop. She nearly went then. Let's prime it again, give it a bit more. Hand cranking old industrial generators, especially diesel ones, is a really good alternative to a gym membership. It's cheaper. Yep. Yeah, well, she lives. And the first thing I'm going to do is try and lift it up using this little winch that I've got, and lift it off the floor so I can separate the engine from the frame. Hopefully it's well mounted there. The generator does have a little bit of an eye socket on there, which I think is intended for lifting. Let's give it a go. Yeah, that's not brilliant, but it'll do for the minute. If there's any 4 bolts holding the whole thing onto the frame, I'm going to find it a lot easier to clean it up and repaint it with the engine separated from the frame, so that's what I'm going to do. No real idea how old this generator is. Other than it's pre-1986. It's probably, I don't know, late 1970s? Really? Must be a way of finding out. It's probably about the same age as me. Not carefully, I'm at risk of the frame dropping off the bottom, so what I'm going to do is lower it back down again onto its base, and then take the nuts off completely, and then hopefully I'll lift it up again and it will bring the engine with it, leaving the frame behind. Okay, that one's off. And that one's off. Now all 4 nuts are off. So this is the moment of truth. Let's have a look. There we go. That's straightforward, isn't it? Frame doesn't weigh hardly anything. Yeah, so that's now ready for sanding and cleaning and repainting. Alright, this is quite close to coming off now, hopefully. Ooh. Alright. Certainly a lot of engine oil under this. There we go. Yeah. It's pretty filthy. Yeah. So I can lower that down now. Yeah, it's not too heavy as it is actually. It is quite heavy, I suppose. I can move it around. It's actually stopped raining today, which doesn't happen very often, given that it's March in North Wales. So I'm going to take advantage of the nicer weather and give this a bit of a brushing off so I can give it a paint. Right. That's quite painful on the hands, that. I'll try and get some blood back in. See if this is a bit easier on the hand. Okay, plan now is to just make the top surface, which is this face here. I've used the brutal brush, I've decided to call it, to get all the paint off, but it's left the surface quite rough. Certainly bare metal, but it's not going to give a particularly nice paint finish because this side is very visible. What I'm going to do is give it a bit of a sand with, I think this is about 100 grit paper. Give it a sand, and then maybe use a finer one again later, like maybe a 400 grit, maybe even an 800 grit, just to smooth the surface off, get all these gouges out of it, and then hopefully I'll get a nice paint finish when I do apply paint a bit later on. So here goes. At 1000 grit now. I don't want to end up with an absolute mirror finish because the paint won't stick to it then, but I do want to get out some of these sort of nasty shapes on it. Don't need to worry about this area because that's where the motor bolts to, and the alternator goes over the top here, so you can't even really see that bit either. These sides, particularly want to be as nice a finish as possible. purpose of the red oxide is to act as an undercoat. It seals the bare steel, gives you a nice base for the proper paint layer over the top. Because you don't want to just put the paint straight on this, because it will corrode quite quickly. Dries pretty fast, this stuff. Okay, as you can see, I've been busy with the frame, the sort of wheelbarrow shaped frame for the generator. It was the same sort of dirty yellow as everything else, so I've been wire brushing it down back to bright steel, just making it look a lot nicer. I've still got quite a way to go, there's quite a few bits I haven't done yet. It's exactly a 1-inch tube, which has been handy because it's meant that I can get replacement fixtures for it. The old wheelbarrow handles on it were pretty tired and not in very good condition, so I've managed to get a few more. They're only a few quid on eBay. This is a 1-inch rubber handle for a 1-inch tube. It does go on, it's tight, but it goes on. When this has got a few coats of paint on it, that will be nice and snug. Might need welling on a bit with a soft mallet, but that's good because that means it will never come off, or by accident anyway. Now towards the front of the vehicle here, see these front stub ends. These used to have handles on, just like at the back. They were taken off sometime before I got this generator. I guess the idea was there'd be a handle at the front, handle at the back, and then you can lift the generator on and off the railway wagons. But I think it looks messy. It looks very obvious that something's been cut off here. It's not even a very sort of neat edge there, so I'm going to trim that off. And I have in my pocket a couple of these little tube caps. Again, they're for 1 inch again, so when that's nice and flush, that will go in the end, and it will just look a little bit more, you could put it a little bit more factory, like it was supposed to look like that. It's just a little thing that's bugged me. So I'm going to carry on wire brushing the paint off this, try and get it ready for undercoating. I'm going to make a start dismantling some of the cowling on the engine. There's a nice big sheet of cowling here that directs the air from the fan over the engine cooling fins. Never taken one of these off before. I doubt it's very difficult. Looks to me like there's two bolts. Well, nuts. Well, that's a bolt, that's a nut. That will hopefully let me remove that. This one's part of the fuel tank, obviously. So I might need to actually remove the fuel tank first, we'll see. Yeah, there we go. Empty the fuel tank of diesel. Still, I don't know, it's about a third full. Got a tray here. I'm hoping it'll catch all the diesel. There's not too much. Spilt a bit of diesel, not much. How much diesel's in this thing? It's going forever. Okay, I'm just going to show you the inside of this generator control box here, if you can see it very well. On the front, I've got the two output plugs. These are 110 volt, common in the UK. I'll say more about them later. I've got the main breaker switch there. Inside we've got the windings coming out here, the wiring for the windings, the five wires there. Got the two capacitors, although usually generators only have one, this has two. And then here we've got the outputs. There's four, or two pairs, and these are wired in parallel now to give an output of 110 volts. You can, if you want to, rewire this so it's in series, and that would then give you 220 volts, but half the ampage, which I might do. I haven't decided yet. So I could have this generator as a sort of a 220, 230 volt generator instead of a 110 if I want. I'd have to change the plugs on the front. All I need to do is change that to series rather than parallel. It'll double the voltage, but it will half the ampage, of course. That would make it 220. Really, you'd want it about 240 if you're going to do that. But there is a governor, engine speed governor down there, so I would be able to just up the revs a little bit, just to get the voltage up to a little bit nearer, say 240. Although the frequency will go up, which is a side effect of that. The UK, it's supposed to be 50 Hertz, so as it's AC, the cycle is 50 a second. In the US, it's actually 60. But in order to get the voltage up from 220 to 240, you would have to speed the engine up. I'm not quite sure what you'd end up with, but it'd be, given that it's 50 Hertz at 220, it'd be more like, I don't know, 55 probably at 240. It doesn't really matter too much, unless you're running like, main synchronized clocks or something, but you wouldn't really do that off a generator anyway. So the 50 Hertz is not precision, it's only approximate anyway. Okay, so I've separated the engine from the casing of the alternator. The rotor, I think you call it, in the middle, is still attached to the engine output shaft there. You can take that off by the look of it with the bolts that are inside. It'd be a bit difficult to get to, it looks like it will come off. So I could remove that and give that a good clean. I actually don't think I need to really, because it's just as easy to work on with it in situ, I think. The flywheel here, it's in good order. This is all actually, apart from being dirty, it's quite good really. Not really much wrong with it. It's not in bad condition. We've got the bearings here, actually still very good. The pickups here are okay. I'm going to clean them so it retains a good contact there. Other than that, I'm pretty happy to work on that now. Got the shell of the alternator here. Got the pickups around the back, which are there, and they're spring loaded as you'd expect. A very heavy case, so the bearings go. It's all pretty dirty, but it's not really got anything wrong with it. Just needs a good clean. See inside, it's full of soot, probably exhaust soot if anything. So that one needs a really good clean. I can remove these electromagnets if I want to. I probably don't need to. Probably get it quite clean without doing so. Give it a go and give it a nice paint so it's all nice and yellow again when it goes back onto the motor. I just wanted to show you that I've restored the case of the engine a little bit here. What I've done is I've wire brushed it back to bright metal, taken off all the years of old dirt and oil and diesel that was soaked onto it, road dust. Wire brushed it right back, and then I've lacquered it with an engine lacquer, special high temperature. It's like a varnish really, that's designed for engines, withstand up to 800 degrees, so it's fine for this engine. And it's brought out in a lovely glossy, it feels like it's quite a hard surface, and I'm pretty pleased with the result. I think it looks really good. Just for the first time I've offered up one of the painted yellow panels just to see how it's looking on the engine. I'm sure you'll agree it's looking really quite smart now. I like the way it's starting to look. It's a nice contrast, the glossy polished engine castings with a nice bright yellow on for the cowling. There we are. I've not wire brushed absolutely everything, and the brush won't reach some of the tight corners. If I was intending on entering this generator into some kind of competition for generator restoration, then I might have put a bit more effort into that, but I'm not, so I'm not too worried. Okay, next thing to do is to see what we can do with this pretty minging old tyre. I'm willing to guess it's the original tyre, Continental, it says, made in Germany. It's a bit perished, it's got lots of cracks on it, but it's still holding good air. It's very greasy and disgusting inside. So I'm going to put some engine degreaser on it, try and clean it up a little bit with a pressure washer, get all the old muck off it. Okay, I've given the tyre a bit of a pressure wash and a degrease. As you can see, it's actually come up quite nice. While I'm waiting for some of the paint to dry on the frame, I'm going to have a go at cleaning up some of the bolts. I've got a big pot of the bolts that I've taken off the engine to dismantle it, and they're all a little bit oily, dirty, rusty, and you probably can't see that very well. I think they'll stand out now the engine itself is so clean and fresh. I think putting these oily old bolts in will let it down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is put them in the lathe chuck and spin them round, and just use the wire brush on the drill just to brush off everything on the metal, just to bring it back down to bright metal again. You know, I think that'll look much nicer. It's worth taking 10 minutes just to give the bolt heads a bit of a brush. Right, over at the lathe. See, I've just put one of those dirty bolts in the chuck. So just turn it on. It's a lovely old lathe, this, by the way. I bought it from a very good friend of mine. It's a Britannia lathe from roughly World War II sort of time. And basically, this is how we tidy them up. There we are. I don't think it's very clear on this camera, but it's got a nice bright sort of brushed steel look about it. Okay, I've opted just to give it a little bit of a fine sand as well. I've got some I think that's 240 paper. This is my angle grinder. The sanding pad on the end. So I'm just going to quickly polish off the end of it with some paper, just to smarten it up even further. This is now a really fine 2500 grit paper, and it should hopefully polish that bolt head to almost a mirror finish, and see how that goes. Quite difficult to film and do this at the same time. Yeah, I like that. Right, I'm going to do them all like that then. Okay, the time has come to start putting this generator back together. The frame's looking very smart, and I've just put the front tyre back on. It's looking nice and tidy there. I've had to put some new copper bushings on, made from old pipe, so that it stays central, because the old bushings, these ones are pretty worn through, so they're no good. New ones are much tidier, so that's a nice smart looking frame, ready to take the engine and the alternator. I've got the engine base on. It's been a bit of a faff to do it because the old engine mounts are no good anymore, so I've had to kind of make some up with from threaded bar really. The previous engine mounts were rubber ones to give it a degree of shock absorbency, but my other generator like this doesn't have them, and that runs fine, so I'm not bothered about actually putting rubbers on this one as well. Just going to bolt it firmly onto the frame. Done some nice polished stainless bolts, because those ones are quite on display. As the alternator sits here, And you can see them, so I've polished them up. They are stainless anyway, so I don't need to lacquer them. This is going to be the fun part. Mounting this engine onto the bed. And I thought about doing it with the lifting winch. That probably would have been a sensible thing to do. So I summoned some willpower I'm not sure I've got. Yeah. Right. It's quite a heavy engine even with all the ancillaries off it. I've got to get it over there. That's not going to be easy. Right. First of all, I'm going to put it on the ground, so I'm not leaning over this, because that ain't going to help. Put this over here. Right. That's less of a reach. Oh, it's heavy, that. Okay, all good. Okay, the engine is mounted onto the base, and the base is mounted onto the trolley, so we're looking pretty good. It's quite fiddly getting all these parts back on and lining up properly. I don't remember it being this difficult to get them all off. Okay, I've got the exhaust on and the petrol tank, well, diesel tank I should say. The starter mechanism's all back on. Right, let's get a bit of diesel in it. Try not to spill it all over the new paintwork. Oh, there we go. Spilled all over the new paintwork. Alright, decompress. Let's get it turning. Bit of vapour there. There's definitely fuel getting into it. Oh, come on, girl. Go, 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 go. Oh, The control box has a circuit breaker on it, which is this one I've took off. It's a Dorman Smith Loadmaster. This one is rated to 25 amps. You probably can't see that. So 25 amps basically it turns off to protect the equipment. This particular circuit breaker does work okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But I decided I would change it because I'm going to change the generator's configuration to a 220 volt, 230 volt generator instead, because I can do that by changing the wiring in the control box. If I do that, this circuit breaker is then too large because it's 25 amps. I mean, it would work. This thing's rated to 440 volts, but 25 amps at 240 volt is way more than the generator can produce, and it's not really providing a great deal of protection then to the generator or the operator if I leave that one in. So I bought two replacements. These have come out of some old consumer units somewhere. They're easily as old as I am. So I bought a 10 amp and a 15 amp, and to be honest, the 10 amp is probably about right. Because 10 amps, supposing it comes out about 220 volts, at 10 amps that would be 2.2 kilowatts it will trip out, which is about the rating of the generator. Well, it's a 2 kilowatt generator, so really the 10's about right. The 15 might be a little bit high for it, so I'll probably go with the 10, but if I find that it keeps tripping without too much provocation, then I can swap it for the 15. I don't think it should be any higher than 15. I'd also like to show you the new plugs that I've got, new sockets. This is the original one. There are two of these. These are the IEC 110 volt sockets that you get on construction site generators in the UK. You open the lid there. There's your two pins and earth, and they're called 110 volt, but actually they're rather than having a line of 110 and a neutral, they're actually two lines of 55 volts each. So that's difficult to do one hand. That's the earth. And you've got line and line, and they're 55 volts, and that's all each. And the difference between them, given that the cycles are polar opposite, is 110 volts. So you can supply 110 volt AC to your equipment, but each line has a voltage of 55 volts to earth to give an element of safety. So theoretically, if you only touch one wire by accident, you're only going to take a 55 volt shock, which is why they do it that way. So I managed to get these ones. Now, normally these would be blue, but these are actually off stage equipment, so they're black, just with a blue sticker on it, a very dull, non-shiny blue sticker. And it's the 230 volt, 240 volt type. So it's a different keyway. Last night I did a bit of work on the control box here. I've put the 240 volt outlets in, and got the 10 amp breaker on there. It's all very smart. Used nice brass cheese head screws, slot head ones, always the hallmark of a hand assembled bit of gear. And that's looking really nice. I've done the wiring inside. These bolts are a little bit long. They were the only ones I had, but there's no real need to trim them because they're not really in the way, so that's fine. So nice new heavy braided cable connecting everything up. There's no earth yet, got to do that. The alternators all wired in correctly to the transformer here, and there's the outlet wired in series, so you get the higher voltage and lower ampage. So it should give out about 230 volts. So that's all looking pretty nice. Now I need to put the top cover on. That's going to need to be pop riveted in place, I think. We'll see. I've attached the top cover now to the control box here. I pop riveted it. Originally they were brass bolts. I've been a bit lazy and riveted it because I didn't have any bolts. It didn't have a full set anyway, half of them had rattled out. So that's all good, it's all nice and strong. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is fire it up and have a go and see if it outputs nice steady power. I want to see about 220, 230 volts, something like that. Let's see what it puts out. So plugged it in, it run to this little multi-gang adapter. Got this little meter thing here, it's like a power meter. It'll tell me what the voltage is and how many watts it's putting out, etc. It also counts the frequency, which is quite useful, and it should be about 50 Hertz thereabouts. Proper mains voltage here in the UK is exactly 50 Hertz, but I'm hoping it'll be kind of similar, which will show the engine governors running at the right speed. And I've got a heater here, it's a fan heater. It's very simple. It can be fan only, which is about 30 watts. One element, which is about 1000 watts ish. Two elements is about 2000 watts thereabouts. So that's 2 kilowatts, which is the rating of the generator, 2000 watts. I'm pretty sure it'll do a bunch more than that, but it's rated to 2 kilowatts all day every day. That's its continuous duty rating, so that's fine. I don't want to thrash it anyway. It's not a high output generator. Right, well that ran alright. Did deliver the 2 kilowatts. It was a bit smoky at the 2 kilowatts, but you'd expect that. It scoots around all over the place on these paving flags, but if you put it somewhere like on a grassy field, it won't go anywhere. Kind of spins around a bit with the shaking, but no, that's kind of normal for these things. The frequency of the AC was 51 Hertz. And then it drifted a little bit. I noticed it drifted to 49, so it's kind of around 50 Hertz. It's the engine speed governor that controls that. So I was happy with that. That's actually quite accurate for a generator, certainly of this size. Didn't struggle with the 1 kilowatt or the 2 kilowatts. Just a little bit smoky out of the exhaust, but it's probably the really old diesel that's in there that hasn't helped, and it hasn't had a run for a while, so I didn't really let it get up to temperature really. I should have done that before putting it on full chat. I might give it a bit of a run later, just leave it chugging away in a corner of the garden somewhere. But yeah, all seems to work. Voltage was 220 thereabouts. It was probably slightly low. but I noticed when it came under load it went up to about 230. It seemed to sort of drift around that sort of mark. Yeah, it's okay. Very pleased with the way it looks. I think it looks really smart. It's quite tidy. It starts pretty easily. It's not spitting out oil anymore like it was. There's no oil leaks on it. It's a smart generator. I don't really know, to be honest, what I'm going to do with it now. I've kind of finished it really. I might, I'll tell you what will probably happen. I'll put it in the warehouse with a cover over it, a tarpaulin or something, and forget about it for a few months or a year or more, and then get sick of crashing into it, and then put it on eBay or something. I'm sure it'll generate more interest now it's a bit smarter, perhaps. But really is more of a showpiece. I can't really see anyone wanting to use it as a, an everyday work generator. Maybe they will, but I don't know. It's kind of a bit nice to go back on the construction sites. I think it's a bit smart. I think it would look nice in a like an engine collection, stationary engine collection or something like that. Someone would be happy to have it. If I had the space, I'd have a few of these myself. I don't know. Maybe I'll keep hold of it for a bit. It does really look brand new. It looks like it was just been bought from the dealership. And it's a good runner. It runs fine, a modern diesel engine would be a little bit less smoky. Although that's not to say it's cleaner. It's not. It's a bit of a thing. New diesel engines, the particulates are so small that you can't see them. So it looks more shimmery heat coming out of the exhaust, but there's particulates in there, and actually they're worse for you. The little tiny particulates that you can't even see, they get absorbed into your lungs and your bloodstream much more easily than the bigger particulates from an older diesel engine. So it might look a bit smoky, but it's actually not as injurious to you as a modern diesel engine. Well, unless it's got a particulate filter on, and some do, but I don't normally see that on a generator. Maybe a huge one, but not a small one. So yeah, it's a nice machine. I'm very pleased with it. I'm pleased with my work. I know it's been largely a rattle can restoration. There's not been much mechanical work done to it really. A little bit, but not an awful lot. But it didn't really need it, and I think that if it's running well, pulling it apart and putting it back together again for it to then continue to run well is kind of, if it's not broken, don't fix it, I suppose. I don't think it's necessary to strip it down until it needs stripping down. It's running well, so leave it. It'll probably run well for another 40 years. It's been serviced, had an oil change, I've done all the filters. I've converted it to 240 volt rather than the 110, so it's a bit more useful for me. But yeah, no, it's good, it works, all happy. I'd be happy running my gear on this. The voltage is steady, the frequency is steady. I'd happily use my computer on it. I think it's a nice clean output. Happy.